Welcome, everybody. Thank you all for joining tonight. Tonight we're learning the Refuah Shleimah to Chanakila Bas Etel, Refuah Shleimah to Avram Yaakov ben Yael, and the Ilui Nishmas to Avram ben Chaim Yehuda and Yecheskel ben Rabbi Avram. Okay, so we are, Baruch Hashem, we're able to come to the final Makkah of Makkas Bechoros. This is a topic that we started, I want to say 5 or 6 years ago. So Baruch Hashem, we were able to go to completion. It's very, very important to always follow through and complete whatever it is that you're working on. So Baruch Hashem, we're able to get to this final class in this series. I happen to also wanted to do a class on the Kriyas Yamsuf, the splitting of the sea, but we'll see. If we get to that, that's technically a class in itself. So okay, so when we look at the Makkas, when we look at the offensive tactics of that HaKadosh Baruch Hu, went against these Egyptians, where it's like one after another, to try to understand one of the many, many purposes of it. The Ben Ish Chai brings down a story that there was a Bedouin couple. A Bedouin couple is, these Bedouin are these people that live like in tents, nothing fancy, nothing crazy. If you go to Israel, you see them. They live in tin houses, and back when I was in yeshiva, I remember seeing them. They had nothing, like nothing, but they had a satellite dish right on top of their little huts. And this particular Bedouin couple, the husband was like this shlemazel, this like guy who couldn't succeed in anything in life, and he was like sitting home doing nothing. Meanwhile, his wife was a successful woman. She would be working the field, she would be taking care of the sheep, she would be taking care of all the animals, like doing everything from A to Z. And one day he decided, he has to take back his pride over here. He's doing nothing. He's like literally accomplishing nothing in his life. One thing that he needs is his pride. So he comes on one day with 3 sticks. On one stick it says 250. On another stick it says 500. And on a third stick, the biggest stick, it says 1,000. And he goes over to his wife and he says, "My dear wife, you see these sticks?" He says, "The 250, that number represents the power of this stick. I'm able to kill 250 people with this stick." And he says, "The 500 number, that can kill 500 people with this stick. That's how powerful it is. And the 1,000 stick, that can kill 1,000 people." And day after day, he would go out, he would look at his sticks, he would put them on his mantle, and he would go and he would take his 250, and he would come home after a long day, and he said, "Whew," he says, "I just killed 250 people with this stick." And the day after, he would go with his 500 stick, and he'd come home and he'd be like, "I just killed 500 people with this stick." And this went on for a few days. He's coming with the 1,000, with 500, with the 250. And the wife is looking at him. The wife is a smart woman, and she's like, "What is this guy?" He's like, "If it's true, all these people that he's killing, the streets should be filled with blood. It should be filled with bodies. There's nothing there. It's all in his head." She decided that one day she's going to put an end to it. She goes and he takes his 500 stick, and he heads out. She goes shortly afterwards. She dresses up, like in a man's garb. She takes like a rolling pin. She goes on one of the camels and she starts following him. About a half hour later, she catches up to him. She sees him with this stick. She runs up to him and she starts hitting the him with all the stick, and then she grabs his 500 sticks and goes home. He comes back that day, that evening, and his wife's like, "So, how was your day?" And he's like, "Oh," he says, "if only you knew." He said, "I got attacked today by 750 people." He says, "But I only had my 500 stick." And he says, I wasn't able to get everybody. I lost my stick, but I was able to kill 500 people. And the wife says, she's like, "You were able to kill 500 people, really?" He says, "What defeated you?" And she starts waving this rolling pin. He says, was it this rolling pin? That defeated you? Says the Ben Ish Chai. You have the Egyptians that they come with all this power, where the magicians back then were the highest caliber. They were able to really do a lot, and they claimed that they had the power of everything. And HaKadosh Baruch Hu goes and Makkah after Makkah destroys them. They weren't able to replicate. They weren't able to protect themselves. They weren't able to do anything. And HaKadosh Baruch Hu at the end of it was just like this Bedouin, like the wife of this Bedouin, husband, says like your power is meaningless. Your power is all in your mouth and all in what you say. The real power, the real kayach of the world is all lies in HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And that's why one of the many reasons that HaKadosh Baruch Hu hit them with one makkah, another, literally put them into the ground, put them into the place where they ought to be. As we usually correspond in each makkah to which. So there was Basar Mamaras Nivra Ha'olam. The world was created with 10 sayings. 10 times Hashem says Vayomer, Vayi'ar, Vayomer, 10 times, and that corresponds to the 10 makkahs. And we said, why is it that the 10 saying correspond to the 10 makkahs? Because Pharaoh, the Mitzrayim, the Egyptians, they said that God doesn't exist. Mi Hashem Asher Eshma B'Kalei. Who is God that I should listen to him? So Hashem says, oh, you don't know who I am? I'm going to show you. Just like I created the world with 10 sayings, I am going to go and hit you with 10 makkos corresponding to each of the 10 mamaras of the 10 sayings. So which one was Makkas Bechoros? Makkas Bechoros was the final one. This was the big one, and this corresponds to the first mamar, the first Vayomer, which it wasn't with Vayomer, because the first one is Bereshis bara Elokim asher shamayim v'as haaretz. This Makkas Bechoros corresponds to the beginning of the Asar Mamaris. So when we look at this, like the 10th Makkah, and we look at how things build up, to this Makkah, you have Moshe Rabbeinu, right? So we know that there was some plagues that came with warning, right? So we know the process was warning, no warning. The Makkas Bechoros did come with a warning. But if we stop for a second and we look at the psychology of Pharaoh was a dictator. He was a dictator, and not only that, he considered himself, a god. And he comes to this point where Moshe Rabbeinu comes into his palace, brazenly tells him, you better let your servants, your slaves out. And he tells them, if you don't go and if you don't follow this, then there's going to be a plague. And if you don't follow this, there's going to be another plague. And if you follow this, there's going to be another plague. And this dialogue is going back and forth for quite some time. And the obvious question that many people ask, why didn't Pharaoh just get rid of Moshe Rabbeinu? He could have killed him. Right? Pharaoh was not someone who was nervous to kill people. He wasn't nervous on how CNN is going to twist whatever he said, or how MSNBC is going to go and figure out, this is not humanitarian and maybe you shouldn't be doing this because there was none of that. There was none of that nonsense. There was none of that liberal nonsense. He did whatever it is that he wanted. He killed babies. He killed his own babies. He killed the Jewish babies when the astrologers came and told him that there's going to be a Jewish leader that's going to be born and that's going to redeem the Jewish people. Pharaoh was nervous if it's going to be from the Jewish side, if it's going to be from the Egyptian side, that's going to save the Jewish side. He had all babies killed. All male babies, they were just killed. Pharaoh didn't care about killing. So the question is, why didn't Pharaoh go and just kill Moshe Rabbeinu when he just had enough of it? When you look at the Makkas Bechoros, which will make this question even furthermore, it says that Pharaoh, Moshe Rabbeinu gave him it was a warning, meaning he said how it's going to play out, what's going to happen, and the Torah says that Pharaoh woke up from his bed. Rashi explains that he woke up, meaning that he was in his bed, he was sleeping. How can somebody, if you just stop for a second and be how psychotic can this person be? Moshe Rabbeinu so far was 9 for 9. Everything he said came out exactly to the T. And then Moshe Rabbeinu goes and tells him, by the way, at the midnight of this night, all the firstborn are going to die. Pharaoh went to sleep in that night, and he woke up from the commotion. He woke up. How does somebody go to sleep on that night? How does how does a normal sane person? If you look, any dictator throughout history, if someone comes and bothers him this much and tells him this much, he would just go and have his head off and be enough, I'm not interested in it. So why didn't Pharaoh go and just kill Moshe Rabbeinu? A famous question that many people ask. Rabbi Meir Bloch answers a beautiful answer. And that is that Pharaoh wasn't your run-of-the-mill dictator. He wasn't your regular, crazy, psychotic dictator who decides how, everything is in his mind. He was on a whole nother level. Pharaoh considered himself a god. Now, he didn't just tell this to other people. He actually thought about it in himself. Now, if someone's coming and saying, oh, you better be nervous because this and this is going to happen, if Pharaoh goes and listens to this person, what Pharaoh is really telling himself and telling everybody else is like, I'm not that all-powerful. This person is threatening me, and he might be accurate. Pharaoh's psychosis to a certain level was so deep that he himself believed that he is God, and he realized that if he goes and kills Moshe Rabbeinu, that means that Moshe Rabbeinu was a threat. And if Moshe Rabbeinu is a threat, that means that he's not God, he's not all-powerful. So Pharaoh went to sleep on the night that he was supposed to. Pharaoh was the firstborn. He was supposed to die in that night. The craziness, if that you think about it, just shows you the craziness of Pharaoh. He was in such a level of denial. He was such a level of thinking that he was God and he was all-powerful, that his country was being ripped apart by plague, and he still did not acknowledge this. So when Pharaoh gets the warning of the plague of Makkas Bechoros, this happened during the end of Makkas Choshech, the previous plague, the previous Makkah. Pharaoh calls Moshe Rabbeinu. They want, they're starting to negotiate to try to, figure it out. And Moshe was about to leave this negotiation table, and then HaKadosh Baruch Hu wanted Moshe Rabbeinu to give him the final plague, the final warning while he was there. Usually, Moshe Rabbeinu did not get any prophecies in the palace in Mitzrayim over there because it was full of idolatry. It was full of idols. So Moshe Rabbeinu had to leave the area where there's Avodah Zarah, and that's when he was able, there was no tumah, there's no impurity, and then he was able to converse with HaKadosh Baruch Hu. But over here, HaKadosh Baruch Hu wanted him to give him the final message, the final makkah, right then and there where he is. So Moshe Rabbeinu was lifted up 10 tefachim, so he was not associated with the tumah, the impurity over there. HaKadosh Baruch Hu gave him the prophecy of what's going to happen in the 10th makkah, and that's when he went and he told Pharaoh about the 10th plague, which is at the end of the 9th plague. And Moshe said, I received a final message from HaKadosh Baruch Hu, from God, and he said on the eve of the 15th day of Nisan, at the midnight hour, he said at approximately midnight, and we'll soon explain why. He says, God is going to go and going to kill all firstborns in Mitzrayim. Now, before we delve into this, let's just, double click a little bit on the aspect of why did Moshe Rabbeinu say approximately. When HaKadosh Baruch Hu told Moshe Rabbeinu the prophecy, he said that it's going to be at exactly midnight. Moshe Rabbeinu switched it and said at approximately a midnight. So there's a few answers we want to get through. First of all, Rav Schwab explains that the exact of midnight, before I even get to Rav Schwab, let's back it up a little bit. If HaKadosh Baruch Hu goes and says it's going to be at exactly midnight, it's going to be at exactly midnight. But how do we know that everybody else is going to know when exactly midnight was? There was no this atomic clock where you're able to figure out exactly the right time, and there was no internet where you say this is the exact time where you are to the exact second. They would approximate everything. And not only that, and this is where Rav Schwab explains it, the earth is continuously rotating. So the exact location of sunrise, sunset, or midnight in this scenario is always changing, meaning what it is, if you want to be to the exact in a second, what is midnight where I'm sitting is not the same midnight where you're sitting, wherever you are. It might be a split of a second difference, but there's still a difference in it just because the way that the earth is rotating and the way that the time works is just a slight difference. The way that we differentiate we set up time zones, but that's not the most accurate, because what is in one part of the Eastern time zone is very different from if you go all the way far into right where it changes into the Pacific time zone or into the Central time zone. It's not just where you cross a border and all of a sudden you cross a line and all of a sudden everything changes. It's not. That's how we differentiate it in our day and age, but that's not the most accurate. So Moshe Rabbeinu realized that HaKadosh Baruch Hu is going to be accurate, but the Egyptians, they're not going to be accurate, and they're going to be like, oh, you know what? You were wrong. It wasn't exactly midnight. The person can be hit, like in so many different angles, but they'll be like, oh, well, you told me you're going to give me a left hook and a right hook, and the left hook was a little bit lighter. Like they'll go into all these details. Moshe Rabbeinu said, you know what? Like, didn't want to have any chilul Hashem, any like HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and that's why he switched it from exactly midnight to approximately midnight. Nesivos Shalom also explains why is it that HaKadosh Baruch Hu decided to make the Makkas Bechoros. This is the pinnacle. This is the highest Makkah. Why would it be what's the purpose of being at night? And midnight is the darkest night of the time of the night. So the Nesivos Shalom explains that this shows that the redemption of the Jewish people happens in the darkest of night. Whenever you think this is the final plague, this is the plague that brought us to the redemption. When you think that it's all over, when you think there's no hope, when you think you're just about to give in the towel, it says just like the redemption of the Yetzias Mitzrayim happened in the darkest of night, HaKadosh Baruch Hu could save you in your darkest of time. And the Ma'am Laws brings down from the Zohar that Rabbi Chia and Rabbi Yossi were on the road, and they were trying to understand this pasuk where it says that HaKadosh Baruch Hu went and he killed all the firstborns at midnight. Why midnight? So they were going back and forth, and they said, you know what, we're near Tveria. That's where Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai lives. Let's go see Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai. They went to Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, they asked him the question, and he responded that HaKadosh Baruch Hu God wanted that the Makkas Bechoros would happen at night because that's when everybody's going to be home. What is the difference if everybody's going to be home or not going to be home? Because if it was the middle of the day, then people are busy at work. People are busy in the field. They won't realize the extent of the punishment because you have a dead person in the field, you have a dead person in this area, and like it will take only some time to realize, oh wow, the extent of this plague. This Baruch Hu wanted that everybody should realize the extent of it in one instant. So if it was the middle of the night, that's when everybody's home, and that's when everybody would realize the severity of this makkah, of this plague. This Makkah happened on a Wednesday night. This is during the time that the constellation of Ma'adim was dominated in the sky. And this particular night and this particular constellation, this was very, very beneficial. This is the 15th of Nisan. It was a very auspicious time for the Jewish people, but not an auspicious time for the enemies of the Jewish people. And I want to just go through a list of things we don't realize. You go through history and be like, oh yeah, like you don't understand when it actually happened. There's so many things the time of when things happens play a very, very important role. And there's a lot of things that happen on the 15th of Nisan, not only Makkas Bechoros. Adam Arishon told his sons Cain and Hevel that this particular night, the 15th of Nisan, is very, very suited for sacrifice. So he said, eventually the Jewish people will bring the carbon Pesach. So Cain and Hevel both brought a carbon on that night. Cain, the older son, brought a carbon, an unworthy sacrifice, while Hevel, the younger son, brought a fine sacrifice. Yitzchak also knew this night, and this is the night that he wanted to bless his son. So originally he wanted to bless Esav, but because of Rivka, his wife, which is Yaakov and Esav's mother, did the old switcheroo. Yitzchak told Esav, go find me an animal. Esav couldn't find an animal. Hashem made it that he was the best hunter. Hashem made it that he couldn't capture any animal. Rivka, in the meantime, told Yaakov, says, this is the night that you're supposed to get the blessing. And she went and she prepared him the food, and he brought the food, and he got the blessing. This happened in the 15th of Nisan. During the period of the judges, Midian was oppressing the Jewish people. During the 15th night of Nisan, Gideon took an army of 300 men, and he destroyed the large and powerful Midianite army. Also during this time was the period of the kings, where Assyria, where King Sennacherib went and he surrounded Yerushalayim. He surrounded the city of Jerusalem. And on the 15th of Nisan is when HaKadosh Baruch Hu sent an angel down and killed 185,000 Assyrian soldiers. And this all happened on the 15th of Nisan. Also, on the 15th of Nisan was during the story of Purim, which we just passed. The destruction. Purim happened after the destruction of the first Beis Hamikdash. So a lot of the Jewish people were living in the Persian Empire. Haman was preparing this whole elaborate plan. When did everything just turn around on Haman is when Achashverosh was sleeping and he woke up and he couldn't sleep. He had something was bothering him, and this started the chain of events that caused Haman's downfall. What night did Achashverosh have this sleepless night that he couldn't fall asleep? None other than the 15th of Nisan. Hashem also destroyed Sodom on the 15th of Nisan. Avimelech dreamt about the sin that what he was going to do with Sarah, that during this time also happened on the 15th of Nisan. Sisera and his armies were annihilated at this time. Daniel came out of the lion's den on the 15th of Nisan. Belshazzar, this is where from the first base of English, he went and he drank from the kalim of the Beis Hamikdash, and he died that same night. Also, Avraham Avinu went to war with the 4 kings. Many things happened on the 15th of Nisan. 15th of Nisan is a very auspicious time for the Jewish people. So Moshe Rabbeinu is getting the prophecy. He's relaying it over to Pharaoh, and he tells Pharaoh on this same night, on 15th of Nisan, every Egyptian firstborn will die. The princess, the slaves, everybody, the maidservants, everybody in between, they're all going to die. Even the firstborn animals are going to die. There's going to be an uprising against you. Gives them the whole full rundown of the plague. Pharaoh is listening to this plague, and he says, all right, this is the big deal. I'm like, okay, the firstborn. He says, how bad can it be? How many firstborns are there already in Egypt? So one of every, at every family. Okay, this is your big makkah. This is the big plague. And he starts laughing. Moshe Rabbeinu responded that such a cry that's going to come out of Egypt has never been heard and will never be heard again. Everybody's going to be mourning. There's going to be psychological, emotional. There's going to be so much going on over here. So let's try to, break it down and understand what really was so great about this makkah. What was it so significant? So we know that more than physical pain, emotional pain is harder to deal with. It's a greater blow. A lot of the makkahs, granted, they had a lot of psychological pain and they had a lot of emotional pain. This makkah takes it on a completely different level. And there was a few reasons for that. So first and foremost, the plague was that every firstborn will die. But it wasn't just every firstborn to every couple. If it was a firstborn to the woman, if it was a firstborn to the man, whatever, any way that you could twist it, that it would be a firstborn, that child died. Now, why was this so imperative? Because the Egyptian society was known as a very, very, very promiscuous society. It wasn't that they had a lot of infidelity. They weren't a high class, so to speak, society. So when you have a husband and a wife and they have all their children, again, everybody, did their own thing, but a lot of them were in infidelity. And all of a sudden in one, like a husband, could have another relationship, a wife can have a different, and the children could be, and all of a sudden there were so many deaths going around. And all of a sudden the husband and the wife says, what's going on? I thought this is our firstborn. The wife says, what do you mean? This is our firstborn as well. And people are dying. Multiple deaths are happening in the family. So not only is it multiple deaths happening in the family, but there's a psychological twist to this as well. And be like, wait a minute, all the relationship, and be like, is this my child? Is this my child? Who, and there, so it causes friction, it causes shalom bayis, it caused one issue after another for the Egyptian. Besides the mourning of the death that they had to do, they also had all the psychological and emotional anguish that they had over there. The firstborn was not just the males; it was the males or the females that died. And while Moshe Rabbeinu was explaining this, to Pharaoh, there was an old woman over there, and the old woman was present. She starts laughing. She's like, "Oh, what's gonna be with me? Don't got no husband, don't got no children, don't got nothing." He says, "How you're saying every household is gonna have mourning? Every household is gonna have crying like never before?" He says, "I got nothing." And Moshe Rabbeinu says, "You're going to cry the loudest. You're going to see." And we'll pause on this and we'll come back, to it. Moshe Rabbeinu finishes the prophecy about what's going to happen with the plague, and he leaves. Part of the prophecy was that Kadosh Baruch Hu told Moshe Rabbeinu, "You have to go to get the Jewish people to go and borrow the gold and silver from the Egyptians." Now Moshe Rabbeinu was a little bit reluctant because he knew what the Jewish people would say. Like, the Jewish people were not interested at this point with gold and silver. They just wanted to get out, right? When you're starving for your life, you're not looking about like how much money you can make. You just want out. You want out of the situation. So Moshe Rabbeinu was prepared for the reluctance. HaKadosh Baruch Hu told him, like there's going to be a few hesitancies, let's call them, that the Jewish people will say regarding this going and asking the Egyptians for some gold and silver. Number one, they'll say, okay, yeah, we knew that it was originally decreed that the Jewish people will go into Egypt and they're going to leave B'Rechush Gadol, they're going to leave with a lot of money. But the Jewish people would say, but listen, we were supposed to stay in for 400 years. All we got is 210 years that we were there. Maybe we're not worthy of the of the money, so they're reluctant. Maybe it's contingent on staying the full time. So Moshe was to reassure them, no, you still get the money. Another group of people would say, like, do we really want the money? Because so many possessions is going to hinder us. It's going to be like how we're going to be able to escape, how we're going to be able to get out. Moshe Rabbeinu says, no, you shouldn't worry about that either. Then the final section will say, if we borrow the money, then all the Egyptians are going to go chase us. They're going to want us back. Moshe Rabbeinu again said all these fears are groundless. He assured all the Jewish people, you don't have to worry about this. So Moshe Rabbeinu, and the Torah says that HaKadosh Baruch Hu went and he told Avraham Avinu that they're going to be enslaved and they're going to go out with a lot of wealth. HaKadosh Baruch Hu says they got the enslaving part. They're not going to go out. Of course, they're going to get also the wealth. But the Jewish people, they didn't derive any like newfound pleasure or from this wealth. They Moshe Rabbeinu told them this is what you have to do. So this is what they went and they did. They went to the Egyptian neighbors and says, "Can we please borrow some?" And we're supposed to specifically say borrow. Why did they ask them to borrow? Because the Egyptians use the same. Everything's midah keneged midah. The Egyptians use a similar tactic. They told the Jewish people, "Oh, you want to work? You're at 210 years prior. Be like, oh, you want to make a lot of money? Here's what you're gonna do. You're gonna work." You're going to go in and you're going to make a certain amount of bricks. Even Pharaoh's doing it. Everybody is doing it. And the more you work, the more money you're going to make. And then this is how they brought them to work. And eventually they took away all the financial incentives, they took away all the payment, and they made them work as slaves. So they used a similar tactic. That's why HaKadosh Baruch Hu said specifically, go and ask them to borrow the money. Just like they brought you in with that same tactic, you're going to go leave in the same tactic as well. To tell you how much money the Jewish people left, that even the smallest hole, the smallest amount that the Jewish people brought out was with 90 donkeys. They needed 90 donkeys to be able to carry it, right? So just to explain, imagine that you're moving, and you're moving not like, you don't need a U-Haul, right? You imagine you're moving, just like your money, right? Your jewelry, your gold and silver. Most people can move all their wealth, even the most wealthiest, in one car. One Toyota Camry could, haul everything away. How big is the diamonds and the golds and the jewels that you already have that you're able to, we fit it into, to one Toyota Camry. Imagine that the smallest amount that the Jewish was 90 Toyota Camrys filled with gold and jewels and all this money that they had. All the wealth that Yosef accumulated in Egypt, the Jewish people, his descendants, were able to go and leave with it. A king once asked his wise men, what's the most powerful force in the world? So the first wise man said, a woman. A woman is the most powerful force in the world. And before all the feminists go and be like, aha, this guy knows what he's talking about. Let's see why he said that. He explains. He says, Chava brought death into the world. Why? Because she convinced Adam Arishon to go and to eat the forbidden fruit. Delilah was one who subdued Shimon, the strongest man in the world. So it's got to be woman. Woman is the most powerful. A second wise man said, no, honor is the most powerful force in the world. How many things do people do for honor? And the king, responded, honor, woman, you're both really, correct. But you want to know what's the most irresistible, powerful force in the world? And that's money. Money is the bottom of everything. It's, with wars and conflicts and hostilities, and everything boils down to money. The Egyptians were so eager to get the Jewish people to leave Mitzrayim, like the Makkas Bechoros just broke everything. They wanted the Jewish people out. They just said, take everything. Take the money, take the gold, take the silver, take the jewels, take the diamonds, just get out. That if the most powerful force in the world is money, and they were just throwing their money out, and they just said, leave, you could imagine the state that they were in. Now, while all the Jewish people are going and collecting all this money, Moshe Rabbeinu was doing something else. Moshe Rabbeinu was looking for Yosef's coffin. Yosef was, asked his children to promise them that they're going to take him out of Mitzrayim. And Moshe Rabbeinu was looking for 3 days. He was looking for Yosef's coffin and he couldn't find it. Sarach Bas Asher, the daughter of Asher, saw Moshe Rabbeinu and she said, "What's going on? What are you looking for?" He said, "I'm looking for Yosef's coffin. I can't find it." So Sarach said, "Come." She brought him into the bank of the Nile River, and she said, he's over here. Moshe Rabbeinu went, and then he said, "Yosef, the hour of redemption has arrived." He went, and then he took a rock, and he wrote on the rock a special name about Kadosh Baruch Hu, and he wrote Ale Shar. Yosef is known as a shar. He threw the rock into the water. After all these things, the coffin of Yosef, rose. This is for a different class. That rock was later taken by one of the people, and that was used to make the golden calf. That's why how the golden calf talk. That's why whatever. We're not going to get into all the details of that. But we spoke about that previously. But in any case, now Moshe Rabbeinu has Yosef's coffin, and all the Jewish people has all their wealth that they went and they borrowed. So now the Makkah is about to begin. At the stroke of midnight, in the darkest part of the night suddenly all turned into daylight. It's as if the sun was there in midday sun. The entire Egypt was so brightly illuminated that everybody was able to witness everything. And all of a sudden there was thunder and lightning, and there was a poisonous gas that filled the air. The firstborns that they inhaled this poisonous gas, they died. Other firstborn were killed just by the sounds of the thunder and the sounds of the thunder, but there was lightning also. And others died just completely, there was no natural causes. They just, HaKadosh Baruch Hu, they were gone. However, it was 3 categories. Just like the 3 categories over here, the 3 categories of when they died. Not all firstborns, they died right away. One group died immediately. A second group, and it seems like this was the largest group, they got very, very sick, and they were in between life and death the whole night until the morning. In the morning they died. And then there was a third group that fell ill and for 3 days, and then they died. And what's very interesting is that this poisonous gas and this sounds of thunder, anybody who was not a firstborn, which way you were able to spin it, did not die, and it was not harmed, not by the poisonous gas, not by the thunder and the lightning, nothing. Now this, to try to just get a little bit on the detour, in the Shachris prayer, in the morning prayers, in Ezra's Avosenu, we daven, we say, "Mitzrayim gal tanu." HaKadosh Baruch Hu, you took us out of Egypt. Hashem Elokeinu beis avadim p'tisanu, you saved that you took us out, redeemed us from the house of slavery. Kol b'chareim arakta, and then it finishes. So how does it start? It starts off with you redeemed us from Egypt, and then you kill the firstborn. And Rabbi Fran brings us down, be like, wait a minute, this is chronologically not correct. HaKadosh Baruch Hu didn't take us out of Egypt and then kill the firstborn. Rather, he killed the firstborn and then he took us out of Egypt. And to make the question even further, we can say, okay, well, maybe it's not chronologically correct. But you look in the Ma'ariv prayer, in Emes Ve'emuna, it says, "Hamakka be'evrasa kol b'chorei Mitzrayim, v'yetzeis ama Yisrael mitocham l'cheres ha'olam." Hamakka be'evrasa kol b'chorei Mitzrayim. First, it says that HaKadosh Baruch Hu hit all the firstborn, and then v'yetzeis ama Yisrael mitocham. And then HaKadosh Baruch Hu took all the Jewish people out. So wait a minute. In Shachris, we say that HaKadosh Baruch Hu took us out of Mitzrayim and then he killed the firstborn. In Ma'ariv, we say that he hit the firstborn and then he took us out of Mitzrayim. Which one was it? Did he take us out of Egypt first and then he hit the firstborn? Or did he hit the firstborn and then take us out? It seems to be conflicting. And according to this, Rabbi Shlomo Zalman Auerbach explains that this is how we understand and how these Egyptian firstborns, how they died. HaKadosh Baruch Hu hit most of them on, in the night, meaning that he hit them and they were in the in-between stages. They didn't die yet. And then in the morning, once the Jewish people went out, once the Jewish people were able to witness it, that's when they died. So that's why when we look at the morning prayer, it says, Mitzrayim Galtanu, HaKadosh Baruch Hu took us out of Egypt, and then the Egyptians died, because that's what happened in the daytime. After Makkas Bechoros, the Jewish people left, and then the Egyptians died during that time period. And at night, what does it say? It says Hamakeh be'evraza kol b'chorei Mitzrayim. It doesn't say that HaKadosh Baruch Hu killed them. It says Hamakeh. HaKadosh Baruch Hu hit them. He smote them. What does that mean? That the initial affliction started off in the night, and then it lasted until the day. The Jewish people left, and the Egyptians died. So really, both aspects are correct, and both aspects are accurate. These firstborn, the firstborn in Egypt, they were held in the highest regard. They were given to the children, to the idolatry. They were given a very, very high level. Not only the firstborn people, also the firstborn animals, and to the extent that whenever when a firstborn child died, the Egyptian family would create this like sculpture and would carve out into the walls of the house, and they would make this like image, so to speak. Some religions and some sects, certain Chinese sects still do something similar. Not only not the firstborn, but the patriarchs and matriarchs. They make this whole like shrine, and they have this whole ceremonies that they do, and they light incense and whatnot. But the Egyptians, they went, and if a firstborn died, they made this like whole thing, and they would sing and they would dance and they would worship it. It became a whole thing. And what HaKadosh Baruch Hu did during Makkas Bechoros, so let's say there was a family that the firstborn died, and they made this shrine. This shrine crumbled. If it was made out of stone, it crumbled. If it made out of wood, it rotted. If it made out of metal, it melted. HaKadosh Baruch Hu destroyed even what they had of the shrine that was left. There was one woman that all of a sudden you hear her screaming more and louder than everybody else in Egypt, because she had nothing. She didn't have a mother, she didn't have a father, she didn't have any children. She had one firstborn son, but the only thing that she had was this shrine, and that's the only connection to life that she just gave everything to the shrine. And when this Makkah hit, the shrine was destroyed. She didn't have any connection whatsoever. This is the same woman that was laughing at Moshe Rabbeinu in Pharaoh's palace and saying, "Oh yeah, every house is going to have." She was the one that says, "I got nothing, no family, no nothing." But she didn't realize that every single household had an effect. And not only that, like if let's say there was a child that was buried already, the dogs ran wild on this day. They went and they dug up if there was a child that was buried. They dug it up. They brought it over there. It was like the psychological terror that happened during this night to the Egyptians was one above everything else that happened. And you had some Egyptians that they wanted to go and they wanted to save their children. So what they did was they said, okay. They saw these Jewish people. They were painting, on the doors, the blood for the carbon Pesach, right? What the Jewish people were supposed to do, they were supposed to paint on. It was like a ches, where they took the carbon Pesach and they painted the blood on the carbon Pesach on the doorpost, and that kind of protected them from preventing them from getting harmed from Makkas Bechoros. The question that you could ask and be like, wait a minute, HaKadosh Baruch Hu doesn't need a sign and be like, oh yeah, there's blood over here, I'm not going to go in. Like God came down on this night. God doesn't need to be like, oh, there's blood on this doorpost, okay, let me skip it. But rather, they needed an extra merit, because when there are destroyers coming into the town, the destroyer doesn't differentiate between the righteous and the wicked. The destroyer just goes for everyone. So that's why they needed to have an extra merit. The Baruch Hu says, take this, put it. It was almost like a ches on the doorpost, and that ches standing for Chaim. It really represented, there was two sides and one on top. One side for Moshe Rabbeinu, and one side for Aaron HaKohen, which is the merits that supported that, and the top was for HaKadosh Baruch Hu that watched over the Klal Yisrael. But in any case, the Egyptians saw this and said, okay, fine, this is where we're going to be protected. So they went to the Jewish neighbors and says, please, take our firstborn, let him sleep in your house. And whatever trick they tried, it didn't work. They tried to put him in the bed of the Jewish person, they tried to put him in the house of the Jewish person. It didn't work. And the Ben Ish Chai explains that when the when the Makkas Bechoros came down, it wasn't just, it says that HaKadosh Baruch Hu Ba'atzma came down and destroyed it, but it was actually more than that, because HaKadosh Baruch Hu sent down also the destroyers, and that's why if it was only HaKadosh Baruch Hu, they didn't need to, there was no, the whole reason why they had to make all this the blood on the doorpost, and it was for a merit, because of the destroyers that come down. Once they come down, they're not going to be able to they don't differentiate, and people could get harmed. HaKadosh Baruch Hu was not on that level, but rather it was split into categories. In the Egyptian house, the destroyer went in, and the destroyer destroyed whatever they saw. So the destroyer went into the Egyptian house. If an Egyptian went and he hid his firstborn in somebody else's house, in let's say a Jewish person's house, the destroyer comes into the Egyptian house. The destroyer is like an angel, and goes in, doesn't see our firstborn, takes the next best thing. So it takes the next best thing and kills that child, that second child, or whatever it is. Meanwhile, HaKadosh Baruch Hu, into the Jewish houses, HaKadosh Baruch Hu went in, and HaKadosh Baruch Hu went into those houses, and HaKadosh Baruch Hu was to differentiate. Okay, fine. This is the Egyptian. This is going to die. This is the Jew. This is not going to die. So there was really two things going on over there. There were the destroyers that were going on. There's mazikim that were going on. The angel of death was going around in the time of Makkas Bechoros, and HaKadosh Baruch Hu also was going specifically in the Jewish people. So the way that it works is when there's a malach, an angel doesn't really differentiate. Once it goes in, it has the power to even take things that were not meant, so to speak. Everything's meant to be, but not meant to be to a certain extent. And let's just explain it. Getting way off tangent. I didn't want to. I'm not even halfway done. We're already almost finished our time. But we'll speed it up a little bit. But just to explain this, there's the Gemara tells us that when Rabbi Akiva was going and he was being combed to death with an iron comb, it was a time for Kriya Shema. And he started saying Kriya Shema over there, and he was in a very, very happy state. And his students was going, Rabbi, you're going now and you're saying Kriya Shema. And Rabbi Akiva would respond and says, my whole life I was wondering how I'm going to serve God with my whole essence, my whole being. Now I have the chance to do that. Am I not going to do it with happiness? And the torturer was looking at him and be like, what's going on? Like, how are you so happy? You're being tortured to death. What's going on? And he said, either you're a magician that you could remove your pain, or you're someone who just loves pain. And Rabbi Akiva says, no, you should, it's very painful and it's hurting. He says, but I'm going on such a level, and he explains, this is where I'm going to be able to go connect HaKadosh Baruch Hu b'chol moedecha with everything that I have. This is what I always wanted. How am I going to be able to fulfill this? Now I have a chance to fulfill this. The angels, they went to HaKadosh Baruch Hu and says, look, what do you this is the reward for Rabbi Akiva? And the HaKadosh Baruch Hu responds and says, Rabbi Akiva has never been as alive as he is right now. Right now, when his soul is about to, this is like the highest level that he was able to do it. And now we pause for a second, we look at it, and be like, what's going on? The angels didn't know this. The angels didn't know that Rabbi Akiva is doing the highest level of Kiddush. Like, how did they not know it? And the angels, the Chazal explained to us that angels can be influenced. Again, to a certain extent. Obviously, they have a certain task and they fulfill it. But there is a certain a level of influence that happens, and this is where they came with the question. Again, we're not going to get to the free will and how much they have, or different classes we spoke about it. But there is an influence in that, and that's why when it comes to mazikim, which is a lower level, when it comes to the angel of death, this is something that that's why when the mazikim when they come and they have the ability to go and cause problems and they cause death, there's a little bit of leeway that they're able to move around. HaKadosh Baruch Hu does it. So when the mazikim, when the angel of death went into the Egyptian homes, they didn't see the firstborn, they took the next best thing. But for the Jewish homes, only HaKadosh Baruch Hu went in, and HaKadosh Baruch Hu says, you're a Jew, you're going to be saved, and the Egyptian, you're going to die. So the Egyptians, that they thought they were going to outsmart God. They thought they were going to outsmart Moshe Rabbeinu. They're going to outsmart everything, and they're going to figure out a way. They're going to, they figured out that loophole. They figured out that roundabout way that they're going to win. They figured out the system. Those people lost double, and this is a powerful, powerful lesson that you can never, ever gain from going against HaKadosh Baruch Hu. No prophet can go from circumventing HaKadosh Baruch Hu's will. And not only that, you will only lose if you don't follow HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And this is what happened during this time of Makkas Bechoros. And this takes the psychological terror to a whole nother level. So first we said that it's only the firstborn. And then we said that it's going to be the firstborn of either the woman or the man. So if they were promiscuous, then who knows how many it's going to be. And then it's going to be like, what about a child that, was out? And then there was a second child that was, that was there, that he was considered the firstborn, and he was the one that died. And then they're going to be like, wait a minute, is this, and then, the psychological level was, would continue. So, the Egyptians, as much as they tried to save their firstborns, nothing worked. They tried to put them in their temples, and they tried to put them wherever in the Jewish homes. Nothing. In the temples they went, and the temples were all destroyed. If it was made out of wood, it rotted. If it was made out of metal, it melted. If it was made out of stone, it crumbled. And all the firstborns in there died. There's only one idol that wasn't destroyed, and that was Baal Tzafon. Baal Tzafon was an idol that was saved till the end, because this way it would convince the Egyptians. This is where when the Jewish nation they got when they were by Kriyas Yamsuf, this is where they stopped. It almost looked as if they were confused. So HaKadosh Baruch Hu wanted the Egyptians to go and chase after the Jewish people. So he kept one idol still around until the final, where he destroyed it, and that was so that the Egyptians would go and chase out the Jewish people, and that will be destroyed. The final level in Kriyas Yamsuf. So, as we said, that the Egyptians, the firstborn of the Egyptians was either for the mother or either for the father. But let's say somebody pretended to be a firstborn. There was a lot of kavod, there was a lot of honor with being a firstborn. So whether there was a firstborn of the mother, whether it was a firstborn of the father, they died. But if someone pretended to be a firstborn just to get some honors, that died as well. If there was a mother that was carrying a firstborn child, they miscarried and they died along with it. A lot of the Egyptians, they tried to, they heard about this, they tried to run out of the country. Let us escape and let us get out to a different country. It was a neighbor country of Ham. They also died in that country. Furthermore, if there were visitors in Egypt during this time from a foreign country and they were firstborn, they also died. And one of the reasons the Chazal tell us is that they shouldn't say during this time there was a lot of idolatry. The firstborn shouldn't say, oh, you know why all the Egyptians died? It's because of my God. It's because of my God came, the Tzias Mitzrayim, Kriyas Yamsuf, Matan Torah. This was a time period in history where HaKadosh Baruch Hu shows the entire world, Anochi Hashem Elokecha, I am God, and only I am God, and there is no other gods other than me. And HaKadosh Baruch Hu proved this in every single aspect of the way. There was no confusion in saying like, okay, my God is powerful, because during this time there was many, many gods. It wasn't there was my God is powerful, your God is powerful. There was no gods, only HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So there was so much death during this time that the bodies of the firstborn were so many. There was all over the place, and when they started decaying, they began to spread this epidemic of diseases that were going around as well. All said and done, there were hundreds and hundreds of thousands. In fact, one of the Midrashim say that there was 600,000 Egyptians that died during this Makkah of Bechoros. Among the Jewish people, not a single death. Even the very, very sick Jews, they did not die as well. And they had the captives. There were people that they captured, princes and princesses of other nations, and they were imprisoned. Those firstborn also died, and the reason is also the same, similar, because they shouldn't say, oh, you know what? Well, there's actually two reasons. They shouldn't say, number one, oh, our God killed all the Egyptians' firstborns because they captured us. That was one reason, to show that no, you died as well, because it's only HaKadosh Baruch Hu. But there was another reason as well, and that is that when the Jewish people were going through suffering, these captives also rejoiced. They were happy. And the Pasuk in Mishlei tells us, chapter 24, verse 17, B'nifal oivecha al tismach. Don't rejoice when your enemy falls. You have to be very, very careful. If your enemy falls, you shouldn't be happy when your enemy, gets, falls and gets destroyed. Obviously, there's some aspect of relief, but it says specifically in the pasuk, "Al tismach," don't be happy and rejoice during this time. These people, the people that were in the Egyptian prisons, these captives, they were rejoicing when the Jewish people were suffering. And there's actually a lesson from this, that in general you shouldn't rejoice when other people make a mistake. Not your coworkers, not your parents, not your siblings, not your children. You're actually going back, especially not your siblings. If someone has the spouse that made a mistake, you should not gloat over it. You should not rejoice over it. There are many stories where you have, a wife of a rabbi gave the rabbi coffee or tea, and instead of putting sugar, they put in salt, and the rabbi drank the entire thing, said it was delicious, it was excellent. Only later it was found out that it was salt or vinegar that was put in, because they didn't want to hurt the spouse's feelings. And there's stories upon this, and how careful you have to be to make sure that if someone makes a mistake, if someone does something wrong, don't stick it in their face, don't slap it in the face. And in fact, we know that Baruch Hu rewards 500 times more than he punishes. And if people were sentenced to capital punishment for rejoicing in another's misfortune, imagine the reward for empathizing if someone's sorrow, someone's going through something, and you empathize with them, you feel for them. Imagine how much that reward, which is going to be 500 times greater. We know that besides the people that died, also the animals died as well. The people would worship the firstborn animals as gods, and they died as well. So this plague begins, and as it begins, we said that Pharaoh was sleeping. And Pharaoh woke up in the middle of the night. Rav Yaakov Galinsky explains how do you have at one side you have Pharaoh that woke up in the night, but we have other people also that woke up, and we know that Avram Avinu was told by HaKadosh Baruch Hu that he has to sacrifice his son the next day, the son that he waited so long, that son Yitzchak he has to sacrifice. And it says and he woke up in the morning. And he woke up in the morning, be like, wait a minute, how did Avram Avinu go to sleep? And not only that, we have Yonah. When the boat was shaking and everything like that, Yonah also felt, was asleep. How is it possible that you have Pharaoh that was sleeping, and Avram that was sleeping, and Yonah that was sleeping during this time? So Rabbi Yaakov Galinsky explains by a story with the Ger Rebbe, the Imre Emes, that during the time of the Holocaust, this Ger Rebbe, the Imre Emes, was given a pass to go to like a escape pass legally to go to Eretz Yisrael. So you had the Gestapo guards; they were assigned to watch over him, and they were watching over him, and they were transporting him that he would be able to get out. And the people were watching this, and they were asking him, be like, I don't understand, you killed millions and millions of Jews, and you're guarding one Jewish rabbi that he doesn't get killed to make sure that he's able to get out? He says, how does that make any sense? So the Gestapo, the soldiers, they were like, you can't ask us that question. We got orders. Our order is watch over this rabbi and make sure that he gets out. An order is an order, and that's what we listen to it. So you have on one side of the coin where you have Avram Avinu, you have Yonah. They were giving an order. This is what you need to do. So this is what we need to do. We will follow it. On the flip side, Pharaoh was not given an order that he had to do something. In fact, it was just the opposite. Pharaoh was given an order to and he didn't go. And the flip side is that you have someone who is a servant of God, and that's Avram Avinu, that's Yonah. They were servants of God, and whatever God said, that's what they're going to do. And then you had on the flip side people that believed that they were God. People like Pharaoh believed that he was God, and he was like, he went to sleep as well. You have the flip side, Zelu Mazeh bara Elokim. HaKadosh Baruch Hu created both sides. Both sides have an equal power. You could take yourself and believe yourself as to be a servant of God, and then whatever God says that you're going to do, or you could consider yourself your God, and you will look at the face of like things that make absolutely no sense of why you don't wake up, why are you destroying your country, why don't you go and just let the Jewish people go out in this state of like looking of reality. You will be completely defined. You won't be able to even see the clarity that everybody else sees, because you yourself think of yourself as such a high level, God. So this is why Pharaoh was able to go to sleep. And Pharaoh woke up with screams. Everybody was screaming. Not only that, the people were screaming over there. He had his daughter Batya. Batya survived. Batya was also a firstborn, and Pharaoh was also as well as a firstborn. We'll soon see why and how Batya was surviving. But during this time, there was a panic. There was a panic in the palace. All the firstborn are dying. The firstborn of Egypt were very angry. This is in the prelude to the Makkah. They heard about this. Moshe Rabbeinu was 9 for 9. They were very angry, so much so that they went on a killing rampage. And these firstborns, who were considered high in the society, they went and they killed their parents, their fathers. They went and they killed leaders. They went and they were killing many of them. Pharaoh woke up in the middle of the night to all this commotion of this murder and the screaming and everything that was going on of it. He hears what's going on. He gets furious. He gets angry. He starts looking at the counselors and the advisors who advise him not to let the Jewish people go out, and he starts killing them out as well. And there was murder that was happening on so many different angles, and angry screaming from all different angles that were going over here. People were storming the palace. People were screaming at Pharaoh, now why didn't you just let these Jews go? Why did we have to have all this destruction? Pharaoh becomes angry, becomes scared, becomes furious, and he starts running out. He runs out of the palace. He says, let me try to get to Moshe Rabbeinu. And he tries chasing and tries finding Moshe Rabbeinu. He runs to the Jewish settlement and he says, Moshe, Moshe, Moshe. And, everybody was up there. There was a sun that was the light as day, even though it was the middle of the night. But the Jewish people were commanded to stay inside the houses. So they open up the windows and they see Pharaoh running. And the little boys were going, the little children be like, what are you looking for? We're looking for Moshe. Where's Moshe? Oh, you want to look for Moshe Rabbeinu? Okay, go straight. Go straight. Ever see a Israeli give direction? Okay. Yashar, yamina. How does Israeli say? You don't go straight until you see the light and then you make a right. Every block is another straight. He said you go straight, and then you make a right. So you have these. Where did it all come from? It came from Mitzrayim. The Jews, little kids says, oh, you're looking for Moshe Rabbeinu? No problem. This is what you're going to do. You're going to go straight. You're going to see an elephant. You're going to make a right by the elephant. You're going to see a tiger somewhere along the lines of the ram. There you make a left. You're going to see a tree stump over there. Not the one that has the flowers. And they were giving them these wild directions. The power was in such a fearful state. He's like, okay. And he runs into all this wild direction, and he's screaming, Moshe, Moshe Rabbeinu. And this, other children come, oh, you're looking for Moshe Rabbeinu. It's as if they knew. They had these walkie-talkies and be like, okay, I'm sending power to you. And then we're like, okay, I'm sending power to you back. And they give these ridiculous directions. And Pharaoh is running around. There's a reason why there's a song, Pharaoh in Pajamas, in the middle of the night. Pharaoh was running around in a comical fashion from one side of the settlement to another side of the settlement, and go back and forth trying to figure out where Moshe Rabbeinu is. He was in such a state of fear because he was also firstborn. He was going to die. He didn't have a time to get angry at anybody. He was just oh, he's this way. Oh, let me run over here. Oh, he's this way. Okay, let me run over here. Almost like a psychotic person, just running back and forth, screaming, Moshe, 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 Moshe. Finally, he finds Moshe Rabbeinu. Moshe Rabbeinu comes and starts speaking to him behind the wall, and Pharaoh says, come out, I want to talk to you. Moshe Rabbeinu says, sorry, no can do. Can't go out, but Kadosh Baruch Hu told us we can't leave our houses. And be like, no, but we need to, discussing about it. He says, I want to send everybody out. He says, okay, by all means, okay, we'll leave. He says, no, go out now. Be like, it's the middle of the night. We're not going to leave in the middle of the night like thieves. We're going over there. And Pharaoh starts saying, he says, I'm nervous. I'm a firstborn. So Moshe Rabbeinu says, you want to be saved? This is what you need to do. He says, you need to go and you need to say that the Jewish people are no longer your slaves; they're servants of a Kadosh Baruch Hu. So Pharaoh went. He was supposed to say this once. Pharaoh went and he repeated it. The Jewish people, you're no longer slaves of me. You're only servants of a Kadosh Baruch Hu. He runs around screaming about it. He's in a psychotic state of mind, and repeating it over and over again. And also during this whole debacle, Basya, who raised Moshe Rabbeinu, comes also and be like, Moshe Rabbeinu, what are you doing? He says, I'm a firstborn also. You're going to kill me as well. So Moshe Rabbeinu responded and says, Batya, did you ever have any effect of any of the plagues? Any of the 9 people, did it affect you? She's like, to be honest, no, it didn't affect me. He says, this one is not going to affect you as well. You have nothing. You have nothing to worry about. Even though you are a firstborn, you're not going to die. So during this, Makkas Bechoros, where Hakadosh Baruch Hu went and killed specifically the firstborn of the Egyptians, there was a sanctity of the firstborn of the Jewish people, and that is that. We have a pidyon abed, where the firstborn of the Jewish people are forever on a level of sanctity. They were actually supposed to be the Kohanim, the priests of the Beis Hamikdash was supposed to be the firstborn. They lost that during the time of the Egel, of the golden calf. They lost this privilege. But something very interesting, Rabbi Fan brings down from Rabbi Simcha Zisel, the Alter of Kelm, that he once wrote a letter to Baron Rothschild, and he was praising him for all his efforts that he did on behalf of the Jewish people. And he said, what did the Jewish people, the Jewish firstborn people, what did they do to deserve to be sanctified, to have this level of sanctity of Bechoros? They didn't do anything. They were passive. They didn't fight against it. They just did not die. They were firstborn, and they were very passive in everything that happened. And explains the Alter of Kelm that if somebody does a Kiddush Hashem, and it's in a passive role. Well, what was the Kiddush Hashem? It shows the power of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, that HaKadosh Baruch Hu killed the Egyptian firstborn, but not the Jewish firstborn. So it gives a Kiddush Hashem in a passive manner. They did nothing. So it explains the Alter of Kelm to Baron Rothschild. It says, if someone does a Kiddush Hashem in a passive manner, imagine how much reward a person gets if they do a Kiddush Hashem in an active manner. And he was giving, a compliment to this Mr. Rothschild, because he did a lot to help the Jewish people. And there's something very interesting. When you look at the firstborn, at a Bechara, where they need to do a pidyon aben, that's only in a natural birth. There's something very interesting. It has to be a first. If, let's say, it's a first for the father, but not a first for the mother, or it's done in a C-section, a cesarean section, and it's not a Bechara, there's no pidyon aben. Why is it? Why is it that it differentiates if it's, if it has to be both for the mother and the father? It has to be a natural birth. Why does it have to have all these characteristics to have a pidyon aben? In the time, in fact, in Mitzrayim, whether it was a firstborn for the father or whether it was a firstborn for the mother, everybody, any way to make it a firstborn, that child, that adult child, whatever it was, died. So the Avnei Shaham explains that we learn this from the mitzvah Bikur. Mitzvah Bikur, where you bring the first fruit. Why do you bring the first? Why do you bring this first fruit to the Beis Hamikdash? Because people think my power, nature, everything I did, I produced this fruit. I went and I planted a seed and I watered it and I did this and I went through all the steps of harvesting, this fruit and through the natural process. And you think that it was all you. HaKadosh Baruch Hu says, no. You always have to realize that it's not you. It's all from HaKadosh Baruch Hu. It's all from God. And that's why the first of the fruits you have to bring to the Beis Hamikdash. The firstborn child the same way. You think that when do people really appreciate? I mean, everybody should appreciate, but when do people have a different level of appreciation for a child? If let's say they were waiting for a child for a long time, and finally they were blessed with a child, that level of appreciation they have is so much of a higher level. But what happens if everything happened natural? And Baruch Hashem, they were able to be blessed with a child right away, and the child was healthy, and everything went in a natural manner. You kind of forget to have that hakar satov, to have that gratitude to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. That's why HaKadosh Baruch Hu says in opinion of Ben, it has to be that if everything is a natural, it's a first for the mother, first for the father, first, was a natural birth. If everything went in a natural way, in a normal way, that's when you do a opinion of Ben. That's when you realize you have to thank HaKadosh Baruch Hu. That's when you have to go and have gratitude and hakar satov to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. But once you have some sort of deviation, then you have a different level of hakar satov. If there was a C-section, if it wasn't from the mother, if it wasn't first from the father, which means that it was a previous marriage, that everything didn't happen in the natural manner, that's when you realize that, okay, this is where you have to be a little bit thankful. But when everything goes natural, that's when sometimes things slip up and you don't realize how much you have to be thankful and grateful to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And this is one of the lessons that we learn from the Pinyan Aben and from the Makkas Bechoros, that we have to be thankful also and especially for the natural. We'll finish off with two. First of all, we didn't do the measure for measure. We'll go through it very quickly because I want to finish off with a story. The measure for measure, why the Egyptian firstborn died. The Jewish people are known as Bnei Bechorei Yisrael. You are the firstborn nation. The Jewish people are known as the firstborn. The Egyptians tortured the firstborn of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, of God, and they lost their firstborn as well. And we know there's a lot of death that happened during the time of the slavery of Egypt, whether it was that the Jewish people people were the babies were were killed or thrown into the Nile River, or whether they're bathed in the blood, or whether they're put in the blocks. There was death all around. This was midah keneged midah for all the death. But there's one lesson that I want to have a takeaway, which I think we're going to end with this, but we'll see. I know it's getting a little bit late, so I apologize. So when you look at Pharaoh, he was a prime example, and the Zara Shimshon brings down, Nachman and Salzer brings down this this following story, that Pharaoh was the prime example of always messing up and choosing the wrong thing. You ever look at the story of Pesach, and you look at it like Pharaoh worked so hard to mess up. He worked so hard to always going and doing and picking the wrong thing. And we look at the story and be like, how could he be so foolish? How could he be so like how blind and not see straight out? And the answer, really, if we take a step back, and how many times that happens in our lives, where we're going how many times we know what God wants us to do, and we choose the opposite? How many times do we know the direction that we need to go to, and we don't follow that direction like we ought to? There was a person, we'll call him Menashe, who loved is a better word, the finer things of life. He enjoyed the good taste of things, and Baruch Hashem, he was blessed, and he was able to afford the finer things in life. And he had one thing that really, really spoke to him, and that was watches. Watches always like the newest watch. That's something that he was just like, he's got to have it. He had this massive, crazy collection. There was a collector's item, a Patek Philippe, that came out, and he's like, I gotta have this, this watch. He's going back and forth, and it was tens and tens of thousands of dollars. This particular watch, when the time that he wanted to buy it, was the cost price was $60,000. He calls out the manufacturer. He says, I want to place an order for this watch. They said, okay, listen, this is a high demand watch. A lot of collectors want it. There's about a 7-month wait. He says, no problem. Put me on the on the wait list for it. He is going and he is dreaming about this watch. All he thinks, he's going through his day. He was a religious guy. He went to shul. He did his chavrusa. He went to his business. He was, making money. But all he thought about was this watch. This was the thing that, people go crazy over cars. People go crazy over jewelry. People go crazy over dresses. He went crazy over watches. And 7 months go by. And finally, he gets a call from an international caller coming in from Switzerland. He picks it up, all nervous, all excited, butterflies in his stomach. And he's like, hello? And he says, is this Mark? His English name was Mark. He says, yeah, this is he. He says, your watch is ready for delivery. And he's so excited. He's like, oh, amazing. I've been waiting for this. They said, we're ready to ship it to you. As soon as you wire us the funds and send us a confirmation of that, we will overnight this, to you. So he's all excited. He hangs up with them. He says, thank you very much. It's coming over to you shortly. And he's about to call the bank to begin the wire transfer. He wasn't waiting for nothing. He was about to call the bank to begin the wire transfer. As he's about to dial, all of a sudden there's a phone call it's coming in on his phone, and he's not familiar with this number. He picks it up. He's like, hello. He says, hi, this is Yankee. So-and-so is, a Jewish guy. He's going, and he says, is this Menashe? And he's like, yeah. And he says, look, I hear that you're a very giving guy. You're very, you help people in need, which is true. He was a big Baal Tzedakah. And, this Jewish person says there's a Jewish family that just recently had a fire in their house, and they lost everything. So Menashe responded. He says, do they got insurance? And he said, unfortunately, they don't have any insurance. They lost everything. And Menashe is thinking now. He says he's about to spend $60,000 on a watch. And he says, there's a family that lost everything. And he's like, but it's like, he's been waiting for it. This is, it's hard-earned money he wants to buy. All these, he goes over to this to this person. He says, can you do me a favor? Can you give me about a day or two? Let me think about it over and then call me back. The guy says, not a problem. Whatever you can do would be greatly appreciated. He goes and he starts thinking about it. He says, how am I going to go? I'm going to spend money on something I don't need. I just want, like, it's a nice watch. I don't need it. I would appreciate it. I enjoy it. I like it. He's going back and forth, and he's like, how do I, he couldn't bring himself to go and buy something that not only he doesn't need, not a necessity, and this family is thinking about it. He had a good heart, and he decides, he's got to do something to help out his family. He calls his brother. His brother was also a very successful businessman. And he tells his brother a story. He says, listen, I put my money aside. I put 60 grand aside for this watch. And, I was about, it's like literally min hashamayim. It's coming from God. I was about to call the bank. This guy just calls me up. He gives me all the list of rabbis. It's a legitimate cause. This family lost everything. I can't buy the watch. He says, I want to help out this family. I'm putting in 60 grand. He says, you want to go in with me? You want to put in also 60 grand? We'll go into this family. We'll rebuild it. We'll give him everything. We'll give him 120 grand to start with. Brother thinks for a minute. He says, you know what? You got yourself a deal. I'm in for 60 grand as well. He goes and he calls back this collector and he says, you know what? I have $120,000 for you between me and my brother. We're gonna send you the money. I want you to help out this this family. He sends over the money. He calls back the watch company. And he says, listen, what happens if I don't send if I don't complete the purchase? Is there any penalty? And the watch, the guy from Geneva says, to be honest, there's such a long waiting list on this. We'll just go to the next person. You've got nothing to worry about. There's a long list. There's no penalty, no nothing. So he says, you know what? I want to cancel the order for now. They said, not a problem. They canceled the order. This person, this Menashe, lived in Eretz Yisrael. He, in the year November of 2016, there was fires that were they were coming out all over in Eretz Yisrael. Later, it turned out that it was arson. But, there was a fire in there, but everybody had to evacuate. Menashe and his family, in November in 2016, there was a fire and they had to evacuate. And they came in a few days later when the fire was all, subdued and it was taken care of. And they were looking at, it was like a disaster. World War III, style, like houses were burnt to crisp, properties were there was nothing. There was just ash. They were like, what are we even driving for? What's going to be left over in our house? When they get to the house, they see something miraculous. It's as if from like a fairy tale. Wherever the property line was, the fire did not touch. Not a tree, not a grass, not the house, nothing. Everything was there exactly the way that it was. And all of a sudden, he remembered about giving over that money from his watch to this, to this family. Coincidence? I don't think so. You look at it. You have some people that they live their life like a Pharaoh. They live their life and they're oblivious to all the signs and the hints and the things that HaKadosh Baruch Hu sends them. And then you have people like Menashe, where HaKadosh Baruch Hu sends them, a simple phone call. And they stop and they think, be like, what am I supposed to do during this time? What am I supposed to do? And they stand up and they do what they're right. And the lesson that we take away from this, that besides the fact that Hashem sends us hints, for Pharaoh it was clear, for Menashe it was a phone call, but every single one of us gets these hints, get these phone calls, get these messages from HaKadosh Baruch Hu. What are we going to do with HaKadosh Baruch Hu? We know and we see the lessons from Pharaoh that you can never win by going against HaKadosh Baruch Hu. You could hide your firstborn in the temples. You could hide them in the Jewish houses. You cannot win by going against God. And even more, furthermore, is that you'll never ever lose out by listening to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And these are lessons that we have to take away not only for Pesach but throughout the year, where we're going to come to some sort of tests and we're not going to be sure how we're supposed to respond and how we're supposed to think and how we're supposed to feel. And we have to take a step back for a second and realize that if we follow the Torah, we follow the ways of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, the ways of the Torah, we will never ever lose out. We have to also just finish off a famous aspect of the dogs. The dogs never. They usually, when the angel of death comes into the town, the dogs bark. During Leil, the 15th night of Nisan, the dogs did not bark. They did not bark on this night. And because of this, the law is that if you have some sort of nevela of some sort of food that you can't eat, you go and you send it and you give it to the dogs. It's just a lesson to show you that even a dog, what type of free will does a dog have? They went and they they did something to give an extra Kiddush Hashem to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, for HaKadosh Baruch Hu, they got rewarded for not just there, for the Dairis, for the generations and generations to come, the dogs go and they get rewarded. And we have to also realize it's so important, and you can never ever forget this lesson, that if you go and you follow the Torah and you follow what you're supposed to do and you listen to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, you listen what you need to do, you will never ever lose out. We'll finish off with a Kapitel Tehillim as we usually do, and we'll open up to if there is any questions. As usual, we say Kapitel Kuf Lamed, chapter 130. Shiram halais mimama kim karsicha Adonai shema b'koili tiena aznecha kashuv v'isa kol tachanunai im avaynais tish Maria Adonai mi yamoid kim chaslicha leman tivarei kivisi Adonai kif so nafshi b'ledvarei achalti nafshi l'Adonai mishamil l'abaiker shaymim l'abaiker yachal Yisrael l'Adonai kim Adonai yachased v'arbei moifedus v'hu yiftas Yisrael mikol avaynesav Achinu kol beis Yisrael hanesunim batzara v'ashiv yahim dem bein bayam uvein bayabasha hamakim yirachem aleim v'yatziyam mitzara l'erbacha ma'afela l'era u'meshiba l'gula hashta bagala u'bizman kariv v'naimar amen. Okay, it looks like we don't have any questions. I thank you all for joining. Until next time, may you all have an amazing, successful, not only day, not only week, not only year, but also the mindset to realize whatever HaKadosh Baruch Hu sends your way, to make the right choices and not to fall like Pharaoh did, but rather to raise up, just like this Menashe did in this story, and always do the right thing, and you will never ever lose out.